a whim. When I sat it, it was actually because my friend was sitting it and I didn't want to miss out because he was doing it, and I was like, oh, maybe I should do it too. And it was our second year of our undergrad. So I just sat it just to see what it was like. And when I sat it, I actually did extremely well. And I did so well that I got in the top 1%. And when I got my score, I was like, why did I do so well when I didn't really do as much preparation as some other people, and I was kind of lost, and I'd heard lots of opinions and they were confusing, and I just did what I could. And then I started to actually retrospectively start to nut out what this exam was really all about and how I could help people to also understand what it was about and to not fall into the pitfalls that I see a lot of people fall into when it comes to preparing for the GAMSAT. So this evening, I'll be going over a little bit of those things. I'll also be going over a bit about what Halad does, and I'll be going over some of the changes that might be helpful to you with the GAMSAT changing to being online at the end of this month. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. Just pop them in the chat and we'll come to them at the end for you. So yeah. Also, if anyone has their microphone on, if they could just mute it, please, just to make sound easier for everyone. Thank you. Cool. So yes, that's a little bit about me. I'm also one of the tutors that runs GAMSAT programs at Hallowed, which I'll talk about a little bit later. A little bit about me, I really love what I do doing med, but I also love doing many fun things. I'm very adventurous, and I think it's really important to have a life, and that comes into play when you're preparing for the GAMSAT as well. And yes, all of my and yes, there's a lovely picture of me skydiving because I love to be adventurous, and there's another awful picture of me too. But that's enough bad pictures of me. Instead, I wanted to cover briefly what Halad is and what. So if you have heard of Halad before, can you send an emoji into the chat, please, just so we can get a bit of an idea? Cool. All right. Nice. Awesome. So a handful of you, a good amount of you have heard of us before, especially if you haven't, or you might not quite know what we do, especially if you're from interstate. And also just because we are very young, we only started about a year ago. But just to let you know, Halad to Health is actually not a GAMSAT company. We're an international NGO, and we close the gap in global health inequality through delivering accessible health education services across the world. We currently service in rural Philippines, and we have a team over there. That's what we primarily do, and we fund our humanitarian missions through our GAMSAT tuition and our exam services that we provide. So usually all of our funds raised from our GAMSAT tuition fees go to Halad to Health Foundation Philippines to give the free health education to students in the rural Philippines. And Australian uni students have the opportunity to volunteer on these health education mission trips. I was one of the volunteers who went on the very first trip back when I was in my undergrad in biomed. So far, our affordable GAMSAT tuition, it only started November last year. It started with a one-day masterclass. We've already taught over 120 students. And the reason why I do it is because I love public health. I love what Halad does and stands for, but I also love seeing students genuinely succeeding and getting where they want to be in life. And I remember what that felt like trying to get into medical school and how exciting it was. So these are some pictures on the slide of one of our missions, this one here of teaching at a class over in the Philippines. So they're really impactful missions. And so these tuition fees support our mission trips. So far, we've used our GAMSAT funds raised to support 4 mission trips and teach over 4,000 students in rural Philippines. However, this time round, we're not going to be able to be going on our mission trips at the moment because of the pandemic. So instead, we'll be using our tuition fees to support COVID-19 and the workforce that's helping out with treating COVID-19. But we'll tell you a little bit more about that later. So just before we get into official GAMSAT stuff, when you signed up, we put that you would get a free calendar. This is our free deadlines calendar that we've been working on for you. We genuinely want you all to achieve your dreams and to get into medicine. And it really is the most satisfying part of doing this, is seeing people have that opportunity and take that opportunity like I did. One of my friends actually missed out on applying for med at Monash one year, and so he had to wait a whole year. And I was like, I don't want that to happen to anyone ever again, because that's horrible. And now that the GAMSAT is online and some of the dates have changed and it's spread across a few days, there are so many different dates to stay on top of. So to take the stress away, we've made this calendar for you. It has all of GAMSAT, medicine, dentistry, optometry, relevant information. The dates in the calendar should be all updated. And once you subscribe to it, you'll get notifications and you'll get reminders and things as much as you want to when you subscribe. And the link is in the chat for you. So you can just click on the link and you'll be able to subscribe to it. Cool. So what you're all really here for is to talk a little bit about the changes in the GAMSAT. And I know that as soon as changes happened, my inbox was flooded with questions from people and people being very confused and not really knowing, well, like, what about now? So this evening, what I'll be doing is going over some tips on how to tackle some of these changes, and also letting you know that, like, most of your preparations are still perfectly sound and you're going to be fine, and you're probably more prepared than you think. And also letting you know how to access our affordable GAMSAT services between now and the end of May. And like I said, if you have any questions, put them in the chat at the end. If we have time, we'll go through as many as we can. So you're probably feeling a little bit stressed that the GAMSAT's gone online. And firstly, I just really wanted to begin with the basics. So most of you would have been preparing for the GAMSAT as if it was happening back in March. So that means that you probably already had an approach down pat and you were probably preparing. And my biggest tip for that is to it or tweak it if you need to a little bit, but be smart about how you approach it, because you're already probably on the right track anyway. And my top tips for a general good GAMSAT approach include making sure that you're planning and holding yourself accountable, making sure you have a study timetable that actually works for you. And I really love the rule that less is more, and you don't need to do a ton to succeed at the GAMSAT. And I will be going over that a little bit more, because I know that's a common question people ask, is how much study should I be doing right now? So I'll cover that a little bit later. But also Halad has a blog, and you're welcome to read my blog post, which has my top GAMSAT tips on there as well. Cool. So what I really wanted to go over first was that although the GAMSAT has moved online and it seems really frightening, many things are still the same. And some things are different, but some of the differences are actually, in my opinion, better, and you can use them to your advantage. So the things that are is that section 2, in terms of the task requirements and the timing allotted to you, are identical. It's the same thing. It's just that you have to type it instead of handwrite it. The exam is also calibrated the same. It means that they will use the same bell curving system. You don't need to worry. I know that students get worried that some of the questions, there's less questions, so maybe it will like disadvantage you because you have less sort of opportunities to prove yourself. I don't think that's true. The exam uses very clever calibration and statistical techniques. And if you go in and you do your best, you'll get the same outcome regardless of the test format. You actually will have scratch paper according to what ASA has produced for everyone over the past few days, letting everyone know that you can have 2 pieces of scratch paper per session. So you get 2 pieces of paper, double-sided for sections 1 and 2, and 2 pieces for section 3. So that's the same in terms of being able to write down notes on paper. And in fact, it's even better because it's separate from the test booklet. So I think it's better in my opinion. Unfortunately, you still can't eat any snacks. I was secretly hoping that would be something you'd be able to do, which is kind of sad, but you do have a lovely 1-hour break that you can use to your own disposal as you usually would. And you get to be at home for that. So they're the things that are pretty much the same. The things that are different are that they've changed some of the timings and the numbers of questions. I won't go over all the tiny bits of this because it will be in all the emails that you guys have been sent. But section 1 questions have been reduced to 40 and section 3 have been reduced to 60. And there's also been a timing difference in that, especially section 3, you get a little bit of extra time per question. And the speculation is around you having a bit of extra time if like you're clicking between screens and loading screens, but also just adapting to that online format. The biggest difference is obviously that it's online and it's on a screen rather than paper. And the thing that I thought was really great was I was like, yeah, you can wear your pajama pants if you really want. Like, they're not going to tell you off, and it's not socially unacceptable because you're at home. So if you've used ProctorU for uni exams or something like that in the past, that's what it will be on. I'll be talking about that a little bit more later, but there's tons of things you can look up online if you are nervous about the platform. You can type in ProctorU on YouTube and it will literally run you through what ProctorU looks like and what it feels like when you're on there. So if you're that kind of person that's a bit nervous about the interface, you can go on there and have a go and have a play around. Unlike these means, you're not going to be able to find the GAMSAT on Quizlet. You're not going to be able to find the GAMSAT online somewhere. So obviously they've taken huge measures to ensure cheating doesn't happen. Additionally, if you sat the GAMSAT on the Saturday and then your friend sat it on the Sunday, they would get a different set of questions. And so that means that you're not going to be able to tell your friend what was on the GAMSAT and vice versa. Okay, so a lot of things that I wanted to go over were that some of our techniques are going to be slightly different for our sections, but it doesn't mean that your knowledge has to be any different. So the questions themselves will not, there's a lot of speculation, will they be harder, will they be easier? They're going to give you the same questions, the same kind of questions regardless. They're not going to change the question style in any way, but how you approach them might be different. And one of the biggest things that I think people stress about is that now you're not going to be able to write on your piece of paper. So there's not going to be annotating opportunity for you. And so when I was thinking about this, I thought about something that I tell my students, and I definitely am a fan of annotating. So I know it's kind of scary to have it taken away from you to not be able to write on the text that you're given, especially when they're a long text. I particularly teach a lot of section 1, so I understand this can be worrying, but something that I really encourage is active reading. And I teach my students a pick up once rule. And so that basically means that only deal with a piece of text once. So only take one go to properly digest it. That doesn't mean you can't look at it again, but you shouldn't be reading it 5 times to understand what's going on. If you're not understanding the first time, pause, stop, have a think about it and work through that way. So it really is an opportunity to teach you how to actively read and read successfully. And this is something I'd encourage between now and May when you sit the GAMSAT to really hone your skills in on. You can also use your cursor to help you. So you can sort of like follow the words like this if you need to, but I wouldn't say that that's something you can 100% rely on. So what I thought would be helpful is I have put together a little example of how I would annotate if it was an online GAMSAT. So here's a nice text for everyone. I am going to give everyone a minute or two to read the first paragraph and just enjoy the fact that the first paragraph is slightly confusing and convoluted. And then I'm going to chat to you about how I would approach it as an online text that I cannot physically annotate. Okay, so I really like this text because it's not straightforward. It's not an easy text to just like read and go, yep, I've read all the information, I fully understand it. And I think what happens with texts like this is that people will either over abuse the ability to annotate and just underline tons of stuff, or they'll just keep reading and rereading it and hoping that it clicks. And neither of those are very effective or efficient methods, even if eventually you're lucky enough to nut out what you need to. So what I recommend is taking a pause and using checkpoints in the text to help you through. So the first thing that I like to do is as I go through each paragraph, I ask myself, what is this text about? And I build that as I go. And so when I read the text, I was like, well, what do I think this is about? And at first I was like, I have no idea. And then I knew that I wasn't reading it actively enough, or I wasn't really thinking about it as I was reading. I was just reading the words and going, no, I don't really know what this means. When I thought about it, I was like, oh, they're comparing entropy, which is a scientific phenomenon, to human nature. Specifically, they're comparing entropy to cultural energy and values. And there you go. It's basically the idea of entropy causing chaos and causing dissolution. And that's happening now to the Western values in the cultural world as universalism happens. And then I was able to understand, okay, basically what it's saying is that entropy is a really good metaphor for how culture and values sort of get blurred and dissolved as time progresses. And then I kind of knew what it was about. So that's a great starting point. Ask yourself, do I know what this is about? So that's a good way to like actively annotate in your mind. If you are not comfortable with doing it in your head, grab your piece of paper, allocate one piece of paper to section 1 and 1 to section 2, and split up your paper into like sections for the long text, and then give it like, have a space on your paper where you're actually going to write these things down. So you're sort of annotating down onto your paper, but you're not just randomly underlining bits in the text. So then what I do next is I summarize what happened in each paragraph. This is most helpful for long text, but you can pretty much do it for anything. You can do it for parts of poems, use it to whatever you need it to be. So this text does sort of have a progression. It talks about different things. So then I thought, well, paragraph 1 is about the idea of entropy and what I mentioned before. So it's about creating a disorder, and it's being referred to, in this case, Western values and cultural energy. There you go. That's all I'm going to say it's about for now. If you want, you can summarize the bits down the bottom as well about all the different people, but I just left it at that point. And that's my checkpoint. And at that checkpoint, I ask myself, did I get it? Did I understand this paragraph, or did I just read it and go, well, hopefully I'll understand the next paragraph because that one was really hard. If that's what you're doing, that's not a good use of your time. So either you move on to another question and just go, no, this one's like hard, or you actually try to actively read it. So I don't want people keeping on reading the text when they already didn't understand what the first paragraph was about. You're not going to magically work out the rest of the text if you didn't understand a whole first paragraph. Cool. Then the same deal, paragraph 2. What was paragraph 2 about? It was basically about the idea of universalism, and that universalism is the reason why values and culture are getting dissolved. And so I understood that that's what that was about, and I was like, it's a pretty short paragraph, I can move on. The third paragraph is about a few different things, and so I split it up into 3 main points. And so my first point was that I was like, oh, they're speaking about the Enlightenment. Well, the Enlightenment was basically saying that since the Enlightenment, there's been a natural course of progress. But actually, instead of it being progress, they're saying now that there's chaos and degeneration. Cool, I've understood that concept. The next concept is that they brought in this guy named Eliot, and Eliot was really against this idea of cultural degeneration or cultural entropy, and because he believes it creates this wasteland, and he preferred something called mythic order. Now, do I know what mythic order is right now? I don't have a really good idea, but I put it in its place and gone, yep, I understand what they're trying to say that Eliot thought was important and what he tried to do about it. And then the last one is this comparison to what Eliot did. He decided is that the people who were involved in like technology, so technologists and futurists, more believed in transhumanism, which was basically this idea of transforming humanity using technology and using new technology. So that was like a different version of fixing the entropy that Eliot thought was a problem. And so now I've sort of summed up the text. You don't need to use that many words. I just really wanted to break down my thinking for you. You could just write one word for each paragraph. You could write a couple, you could write a phrase, you could write a sentence, you could write nothing and just do it in your head, but have some form of you actively engaging with the text as you go, so that you're sort of like annotating, but you're actively annotating and you don't even need to be writing on it. So the main thing that I thought was important to mention was not to just regurgitate things that you see in the text when you're trying to actively read. So a bad example would be just grabbing one of the sentences and going, yep, okay, like that's what that paragraph was about, and still you actually don't know what that sentence means, or you haven't fully understood whether that sentence encapsulates the paragraph's meaning or not. My rule of thumb for that, explain it back to someone who hasn't read it or who didn't understand any of it when they read it, then you've done it correctly. So you can practice that. You can practice that from now. You can grab a long text later that you don't understand and then have a go explaining it. You can go explain it to your mum or something and see if they're like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense now. And I hope that like by me going over it just then, it made a little bit more sense to you as well. Other tips I have are just more general GAMSAT tips that a lot of people ask me about. It's so fine if you don't understand every word or phrase or line. That's not the point of this checkpoint exercise. The point is so that you don't read the text 5 times over and just sit there and blank out and go, oh my goodness, because I can't annotate it, I'm lost. But the point is not so that you can understand every single word, because that's not necessary. And another thing that I just really wanted to briefly mention was this text is just a text example. It doesn't have any questions attached to it. If it was the GAMSAT, obviously there would be questions. And if you don't know yet whether you prefer to read the questions first or read the text first, then please make sure you know that come GAMSAT day. And either way, it's fine. Either way, you should be reading actively. But just know that about yourself. I personally like to read the text first, but I've met tons of people who like to read the question first, and there's no right or wrong. All right. If you have questions about any of that, you can put them in the chat. Okay, cool. All right. So section 2, I'm really excited about the fact that this has gone online, because you don't have to write furiously anymore. No more hand cramping, no more carpal tunnel. I hope you enjoy that anatomy picture there of carpal tunnel syndrome. You definitely don't need to know it for the GAMSAT, but if you want to know it, there's a head start for med school. But I've been thinking that this section should be typed for years, and if you're worried about it being typed, I've got a couple of little tips for you. So firstly, they're not going to stress about any of your typos, etc. So don't you stress about them either. If you have time to go back and edit, fantastic. If you don't, it's fine, doesn't matter. The good news is that we weren't sure if you would get paper initially when we were told it was online. Now we know that you will. You can do all your plans still on paper. So if you're preferring to do a more visual plan, which I'll show you an example of in a minute, go for it, do it on paper. In fact, I think the paper is better because you have a whole fresh sheet of blank paper. My recommendation would be if you use one piece of paper for section 1 and you have one piece of paper for section 2, and then do part A on one side of the paper and part B on the other, and then you've got it nice and organized. So that's my recommendation. But I did want to go over a couple little things. My word of caution, and ASA have also put this in their booklet, is that less is still more. So I would rather read a concise 300 to 400 word essay than read an 800 to 1,000 word essay because you type twice as fast. It's not necessary to write more. It's not worth writing more. In fact, it's probably too much and it's probably rambling. And just because you have a really good score on Type Racer doesn't mean that this is the place to prove how fast you can type. If you are a fast typer and you're able to keep up with your thoughts as you type fast, use the extra time that you end up with at the end to go back over and edit and check, or use it at the start to help you with planning and formulating what you're writing. So this can be a real advantage to you if this is a skill that you have. If it's not something you're as comfortable with, please start practicing your typed essays. And if you can, try and type them on, I know there's not many of these programs anymore, but try and type them on something that doesn't have autocorrect, because you're not going to have autocorrect on the day. But I mean, Word is still fine, but if you have something that doesn't have autocorrect, that's like a little bonus for you. So I guess I just wanted to point out, like, this could be a blessing rather than a curse for most, if not all of you, because you should all be pretty comfortable with using like word processors and typing online by now. Yeah, and then the last thing is that I don't know for sure, but it's very likely that you have copy paste functions still enabled. So if you need to move a sentence or something around, you actually can do that, unlike on a piece of paper. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Okay. Cool. So I just wanted to show you guys a couple examples of essay plans. This isn't so much something that's different with it being online. This is more because I just want you guys to know that all of the planning styles that you might use, such as something more visual like a mind map, or maybe you use diagrams, or maybe you do something more like this. You can do this on paper, or you can do it on your like online forum. Oh, let's go back there. Or you can still draw something like this on your piece of paper for you. I just randomly grabbed a topic. The topic I chose, I just grabbed like a little quote from. So it's a little bit different to your standard section 2 where you get the 5 quotes, but I got the quote, self-belief and hard work always earn you success. And then I sort of went through, well, I decided I wanted to talk about, yes, self-belief and hard work will get you to success, but what are the costs of success? And then I've sort of branched out some of the different costs here. And then I've gone through what some of my points will be and some of my examples. This is not so much like a lesson today on how to do section 2, so I'll leave it there. But if you'd like to come and learn more about section 2, we do have section 2 classes, which we'll talk about a bit later. Lastly, just like really briefly on section 3, I haven't put a lot here because it should be exactly the same as section 1 in terms of how you approach your active reading. So active reading should be happening regardless of whether it's section 1 or section 3. You should be processing as you go. You shouldn't be reading something 5 times. You should be checking in with yourself and with your understanding. And if you need to write down a key word or you need to draw something out, do it. But definitely your piece of paper is not there so that you can redraw the whole graph that you see on your screen. So be sensible with it, have a practice of it, which I will go over in a minute. My advice is to section off your pieces of paper. So you'll get 2 double-sided pieces of paper for section 3. And what you can do is you can go, okay, one side will be maths, and then one side will be physics, one will be chemistry, one will be biology. Or you can have one will be a calculations page, one will be diagrams page. So you work out what works for you, but I would keep it compartmentalized. So I guess the difference is instead of having a piece of paper where you just scribble stuff all over and use it as your sort of bouncing board for scribbling things down, use it as more like a cheat sheet when you like organize and structure things, so that if you need to go back to something, you know where to go and you know what to look for. So play around with that over the next few weeks as you're doing practice questions. Practice where you put your information and how you use your scratch paper so that it's actually helpful and advantageous to you. It's very similar to when you were in year 12 and if you like had units when you could bring in a cheat book or bring in a bound reference. The people who didn't know how to use their bound reference were no better off bringing it in compared to if you knew how to use it. So know how to use your paper to your advantage is my biggest tip for this. Keeping it neat and organized is going to really help you and pay off and help make a difference in helping you access this online and then kind of having a piece of paper in front of you issue that's going on. Also, you've been given extra time per question for section 3. Some of this time may be chewed up in loading your screen, but it's also to account for this weird interface of having it on the screen and also getting to write something down. So we'll see, but there's potentially a few extra seconds there for you to use. So now that I've kind of broken down the sections and some of the things that might be a little bit of a struggle, I just wanted to go through some general advice that I thought of over the past few weeks. And I think one of the things that's so important is familiarity. And thankfully, like you're already ahead because you should all be pretty familiar with doing at least some things online and on a screen, especially if you've been doing uni online already at Zoom University recently, then you'll have some familiarity with that already. Something that I thought would be really helpful is if you have printed exams that you're still wanting to do, like printed practice exams or printed questions, scan them and put them up on your computer so you can practice seeing them. As far as we know so far, ASA have decided to keep the same layout so that the exam looks the same on your computer. So if you scan on ASA exams that you have from the past or other practice exams, it should look fairly similar to what it will look like on the day, and that might help you become a bit more familiar with it. Other things I thought of were if you're reading things online, reading texts, and if you like to read books, maybe read an ebook online. Get used to looking at your screen for hours on end. I'm sure most of you that should be fine. If not, here's your permission to watch 5 hours of Netflix. But just make sure that on the day you're actually able to look at your screen for that long without getting a massive migraine and having to lie down. And that would be really frustrating if that was on your GAMSAT day. And probably just make sure that things like your internet is all good and your Proctor is ready to go. So I would leave those checks. I would do those checks early rather than leaving them until last minute. So they're just sort of general things. A lot of them are self-explanatory, but just wanted to let you all know about those. I'm a really like glass half full kind of person. I'm very optimistic, but I thought let's like think about the advantages of this and which sort of glass you're currently seeing in your mind. So I know that there was a lot of frustration around, especially when people felt ready for the March GAMSAT and it being cancelled, and then the question types might be feeling different when they're actually okay, they're going to be fine, you know what's going on. Maybe you're worried that there's less questions and there's a lot of fears going on, but it's really helpful to think of the advantages. And so I just sort of jotted down, well, what are the great things about it being online? So I mentioned before already that you can type online, and a lot of us probably feel a bit more comfortable typing our essays online. But also I thought, you know what, it's going to be so much quicker. So on my GAMSAT day, I was there for 11 hours. I remember from the time my mum dropped me off to the time I got picked up, it was 11 hours. It was a long day. So it's a lot quicker. Administration and the exam itself will be shortened in length because it's just you at your computer and you just need to set up your proctor and show them your room and the things that are in the ACER booklet that you need to do. Also, a big thing is mindset. Not everyone is like this or is as sensitive to this, but personally, I really struggled hearing all of the chatter at the lunch break. I remember someone saying that they wrote something in the section 2 essay and I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't write about that. I'm not going to do well. And I was really stressed. I'm quite an introvert in that I need to be alone to recharge. And so I was like, that's awesome. You can sit and have your own break and make your coffee and be in your own home, and you can reset before section 3. And if you need to talk to someone, you can go talk to whoever's in isolation with you at home. Otherwise, you've got that time where you're not going to be surrounded by the noise of everybody else who's also sitting in the same exam as you and who's just as stressed as you are. And what I thought was really good as well was I remember being there and looking around and being like, oh my goodness, all these other people look so smart and I'm never going to like be as good as them or get in or whatever. It's just you sitting at home doing the GAMSAT. And I think that that's a huge advantage. You can also choose an exam slot that works for you. Get in early so that you can pick your slot is my advice there. And also you're really familiar with your own technology. I do pretty much everything on my laptop. I do all my work and a lot of my uni on my laptop. And so I'm really familiar with it. And if you're the same, there you go. You're super familiar with the interface and it's something that you should feel really comfortable with. Additionally, don't stress about things that might be the disadvantages of it being online. Everyone's in the exact same boat, hence this really adorable image I found of tons of people on a boat. You're not going to be able to use all of your old strategies, especially if your strategy was like underlining words. But this doesn't negate your ability to think or to reason. And I know that that's something that everyone is able to do and that we can help you to do really well. And this is things that clinicians do every single day, is that on the ball, we have to reason and we have to think without being able to annotate someone's medical record. So basically you're just preparing to be a doctor already. So you can think of it that way. And finally, just that I think everyone's more prepared than you might feel right now because you were prepared to sit it in March anyway. So you're basically getting a bonus 2 months. So I wanted to come back to this. I have so many people ask me, yeah, but how much study should I be doing? And I'm really worried and I feel like everyone's doing more than me. And, you know, is this enough? Is this not enough? And it can be very confusing. And what does study for the GAMSAT even mean? And what should I be doing in that time? So I just wanted to touch on this. Firstly, I really love public health. As I mentioned before, it's something I'm really passionate about and want to get more involved in my medical career. So if you have done things like this in your undergrad before or something similar, I really love the idea of correlation versus causation. And there's, you can Google this, there's heaps of hilarious correlation versus causation maps online. This one is basically saying that there's a correlation between the divorce rate in mean and the consumption of margarine, and that divorce rates are lower when less margarine is consumed. However, we know that margarine consumption is very unlikely to be what causes divorce, although it would probably cause me to divorce because I hate margarine. So it does make perfect sense to me, I guess. But basically what I wanted people to get out of this is that sometimes we can use our human reason to realize that something doesn't make sense, even if it looks like it makes sense on paper. And in terms of the GAMSAT, this means that increased study time does not necessarily cause a better GAMSAT outcome. I think what can happen sometimes is you hear someone who studied a lot for GAMSAT and did tons of hours of preparation, and they also do really well, and you see that correlation and you go, oh, that's the causation. They've done really, really well at the GAMSAT because they did a lot of preparation. And that does not have to be true. And I just wanted to really emphasize that for people who are feeling nervous that maybe they haven't done enough, because it doesn't really work that way. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what I did and show you some examples. So I like to put together study timetables. You don't have to put one as rigid together as this, but I just wanted to really emphasize it and show you my week. This is my legitimate week. This week I wanted it to be genuine. The only difference is putting in the GAMSAT parts. So section 1, section 2. I'm obviously not studying for the GAMSAT right now, so those parts aren't legit. But the first thing I wanted to highlight is focus on the things you need to be focusing on, because and the other one is it's 100% okay to have a life. You're allowed to have a life, and you do not need to treat your GAMSAT study and preparation like a 9-to-5 full-time job. So when I put this together, I thought about some statistics that are actually in here. The first little thing is that I am a night owl. I'm far more productive at night, which is terrible for ward rounds as a medical student. And I'm really loving not having to go to those at the moment. But I've put in here that I sleep in until 10 a.m. because I'm just not productive before then. And so why would I put in to try GAMSAT study before 10 a.m.? Also during this week, I've got 18 hours of uni classes. You might have a bit less than that if you're doing uni at the moment. So it's highly possible to study for the GAMSAT right now, even though you're back at uni. And it's okay if you put some of your uni study back a little bit because you're focusing on GAMSAT. You will survive uni if you do that. Also, I've got 9 hours worth of work stuff in here. Actually, I think it ended up being 11 with some Halad tasks in there, which is pretty reasonable. That's most people who are still working at a casual job at the moment. I also have 6 hours of exercise in here, which is something I really like to do. I've still got time to actually eat. I've got spare rest times, rest periods when I can do things that I enjoy. And I even drove interstate to my dad's over the weekend. So as you can see, you don't have to spend tons of time studying for the GAMSAT or doing GAMSAT work to do well at it. And this is very indicative of how my GAMSAT study went. This is pretty much on par of how much time I spent. My rule of thumb is to spend no more than on average 2 hours per day. So as you can see, some days I have more than 2, so I have 4 hours here, but I have 13 hours overall over the week of doing GAMSAT stuff, and that's pretty much perfect. So if you're doing about 2 hours per day, that's more than enough. And so what I wanted to show you was something a little more specific. I mentioned planning before. When I study for GAMSAT, or when I did my GAMSAT prep, I didn't just go, okay, on Monday at 3 p.m, I'm doing 2 hours of section 1, and then open my section 1 stuff and go, cool, section 1. I made sure that during my planning session each week, I knew that when I did section 1 on Monday, what I wanted to be doing. And so I decided, and I've just sort of made this up, but use your strengths and weaknesses to help you. And let's say I thought, oh, well, I want to practice that active reading of long text. So I'm going to do at least 5 long texts in those 2 hours and practice my annotating. I usually allocate more time than I'll need to do a task, so that either I can do more of it if I want to, but more importantly, so that I can reflect. And also, if I end up taking more time than I thought I would, I don't get discouraged and feel like I just can't do this. And I think that mindset is a really important part of the GAMSAT as well. And then I did the same for all of the other bits as well. So like section 2 on the Monday bit, so that would correlate to this part. I was going to do 2 essays and 2 essay plans, and I wanted that to take me about 2 hours. And so I filled it all out, all the things I want to do. And then I've even been able to put in time on the Saturday to do a practice exam, and I've put in the new times for the online exam so I know how it felt. And then in this final column along the side here, I've put in all of their time totals, and down the very bottom, it tells me how much time I've spent in the entire week or plan to spend, which is 13 hours. The important point there is you need to be able to look at that and go, does that sound logical for me? Do I think I have 13 hours this week that I can give to GAMSAT? And if the answer is no, because you have a really busy week, then don't try and make it 13 hours. It's not that that is how much you have to do. If you only have 5 hours, do a practice exam or do what you need to do. It doesn't need to be some miraculous 40-hour week of GAMSAT preparation. It's just not necessary. And this is very indicative of what I did, and some weeks I did even less than this. So don't stress about how much you need to be doing or not doing. Okay, what I want to do is pause at this point. I want you all to type in the chat one thing so far that you've gotten out of this question, and one goal that you're going to set, or one thing you're going to do when you leave. I was going to say go home, but you're not really going home. One thing that you're going to do to help you between now and May. And then we'll go through a couple of things and I'll answer some of your questions for you. Yeah, awesome. The online platform, I think, has a lot of benefits. And the UCAT, or the UMAT if you sat it a long time ago, which is the undergrad version of this, has been online for the past year. So this could, I'm not a fortune teller, but this could be something that GAMSAT even changes to, which could be really beneficial. Yeah, awesome. I definitely don't want anyone feeling guilty for not spending tons of time doing GAMSAT stuff, or feeling like guilty because you're watching Tiger King on Netflix. Please enjoy your lives and keep yourself sane, especially at this time. It's more than enough to be doing what you can. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. All right. You can keep writing them in if you would like to. Also, if you did have questions at the top, don't stress. I can still see them and I will get to them soon. Cool. So what is next after today? Some of you in here today have met me before. You've had me as your tutor or mentor before. Ooh, am I back or am I still frozen? Am I back? Yeah, okay, cool, thank you. All right, so we'll just go on with what's next. So yes, some of you may have, in fact, some of you here have met me before. Some of you I've run sessions with before, and they've been really successful so far. I wanted to share something that I don't think I've shared with them before. I wanted to share a little bit about my GAMSAT story in terms of the parts that were a little bit more messy. And one of them was that when I started thinking about sitting it, I went to an intro session, which was pretty much like, here's what the GAMSAT is. There's 3 sections. There you go. And then they said, you can pay us $10 and you can get a free phone call with us. And I called them and I paid the $10 and I got a phone call and they spoke to me for half an hour and it was quite helpful. They calmed a lot of my nerves and that was fantastic. And then they said, pay us $5,000 before the end of this phone call to get a place in our program, or you miss out on a place. And I said, well, I don't have $5,000 to pay you right this second. And I don't even know if I haven't done any research on anything. I don't even know if that's something I want to do. And that's a lot of money. And he gave me this ultimatum that basically if I didn't pay the $5,000 for the program, then I wouldn't pass the GAMSAT. I would never get into medical school. And then I've lost years worth of salary as a doctor. Firstly, that's a terrible way to think of getting into medical school. your life is not over just because if you have to take another year or something to get in. That was a very silly thing for him to say to me. And I was really discouraged and really upset after the phone call, and just felt like I can't do this. And I couldn't pay the $5,000. So I hung up, and that was the end of that. However, I spent the next few months trying to work out, well, how will I arrive at the GAMSAT feeling prepared? And I used a lot of resources online and resources my friends had. And the $10 for that info session was all that so that phone call was all that I spent. But I kind of wished that there was something out there that wasn't super expensive, but that actually could have helped me and was reasonable for me to afford. We believe here that people shouldn't have to pay more than what they pay for the GAMSAT itself to be able to get the tuition and get the style of teaching that they require to help them have the edge that they need and capitalize on their strengths and improve on their weaknesses. So completely up to you how you approach your GAMSAT journey, but I wouldn't recommend spending thousands of dollars to people who are trying to just get your money for their business. So what I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about your options. So today, after today, you can take everything I've told you, go home, have a go at it, see how it's working, and try to apply the changes to your study routine. You can use trial and error. You can look for questions online. That's fine, and it's doable, and it can help you, but it can sometimes waste time, and it can waste time if you're looking for reasons. Or if you would like to, you can sign up to do some stuff with us and some of our courses over the next 2 months before the GAMSAT. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our courses. So some of you have done courses with us before will know that we ran a section 1 course for 6 weeks over the summer and a section 2 course for 2 weeks, and we had 1 mock exam for each. Since then, we've been really thinking about how to expand our courses and take on the helpful feedback that we received. And we'll now be having 6 weeks of a section 1 course and of a section 2 course and of a section 3 course. They'll be specifically designed to be both intensive and integrate the online platform that the GAMSAT will now be on. And they'll be 2 hours per week instead of 1, because we found that 1 hour a week wasn't quite enough time. Also, we found that the mock exams were super helpful for people. So we'll be providing a mock exam for section 1 and section 2 and section 3 3 times. So you can sit 3 sets of mock exams over the month of May. So these are like designed to be an extension version of our intensive course that you've some of you may have already done. And you're also welcome to join our section 3 course, because that's something that we weren't able to provide in the past. Okay, so here's just a bit of a breakdown of the pricing. And as you can see, if you sign up with a friend, you can get a discount. The reason why I thought that this was really important is because study groups were really good for me, and study groups with people who actually were motivated and committed to the GAMSAT and who were honest enough to give me really good feedback and advice, and I could give them the same back. And for us, our prices are really important. We think it's really important to keep it affordable as $10 per hour. So no more than that for our prices when you sign up with a friend. I just wanted to show you as well our class schedule so that you can get an idea of when we're running things and that they're scattered throughout the week so that you can find something that works for you. And also you'll notice that we have more tutors than just me. We've got some tutors for section 3 and section 2 and section 1 to help out as well. And I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a minute. Here is our schedule for our mock exams as well. And so you can choose between Saturday or Sunday to sit them, so that if you're doing classes on Saturdays or Sundays, you don't have to miss out on sitting mock exams with us. We'll also be providing feedback on the mock exams, including bell curving and including broken down feedback the week after. So here are our tutors. So I run the GAMSAT programs and oversee the content. However, we have 5 excellent tutors and we have 6 content creators, and we have a back-end team that helps with content creation as well. And all of these tutors are really personable, they're fun, and they have very relatable GAMSAT stories, which they remember because they're all medical students at the moment. They all have a range of teaching styles. They all have fun, interests, and hobbies you can ask them about. and they also all have different skill sets. So I really enjoy teaching section 1 and section 2, but Mish, Karim and Keely really enjoy teaching section 3, and so that's really awesome that they can now provide that as well. So we actually have Keely here with us. So did you want to say hello to everyone, Keely?
Yeah, I'll keep it pretty brief because I hate talking about myself, but I'm Keely. I'm one of your section 3 tutors. Yeah, so I just found it really interesting listening to Sarah talking about her experience and her advice, because experience was very different to that. I wish I was as organised as Sarah was and had her study timetables and things, because I was a bit all over the shop. It's something, thankfully, at school I finally learned a bit now. It's helped me a bit more my uni work to kind of set a bit of a timetable out. But yeah, I love to. I suppose my interest in section 3 is I am a real big chemistry nerd. That's my kind of forte. But I do love all of the section 3 areas, and I really enjoy teaching them and learning off you guys as well, because I think it's just important that as much as I can teach you something, I can learn things from you guys at the same time. And I think that's really cool. So yeah.
Great. And if you would like to be in one of Keely's classes, you can sign up. Awesome. With that, however, I did want to tell you one thing about our classes. Here's how you can enroll. We're going to put a link in here now for you. We only have a capacity of 10 people per class because we like to keep them small. We think that was a really important part of our classes. So if you'd like to sign up, we will be making this live and marketing this after our webinar. So you guys are the first ones to get access to this link if you would like to sign up for any of our classes. All right. On top of that, I'm going to just make a suggestion now. You do not have to have a friend that you are signing up for the GAMSAT with. The benefit of being in this webinar is that you have tons of students in here who might be in the same boat, who don't have someone else to sign up with, and who are also just as keen as you are to be sitting the GAMSAT and getting some advice and some guidance. So I'm going to give you a minute now to message people in the chat if you need a friend to sign up with. So you can go for that now if you would like to. And you can also, there's an option to message privately in case you haven't done that on Zoom before. And if you, or when you have a friend to sign up with, if you can email Carleen, who introduced herself at the start, and she will give you a discount code to apply, or she'll make sure that your email can have the discount attached to it when you enroll. So I just wanted to give you guys all some time now to ask questions. I'm going to go back in the chat and answer the questions that are already in there, and then you can also type in questions that you come up with. Okay, so one of the questions was, how stringent would Proctor U be about the room, such as having a shelf with books on it, etc. So the first thing is that I would recommend is if you go on YouTube and type in Proctor U, and they actually have their own YouTube account, which is kind of weird, but also helpful, because on the YouTube account, it has a video which shows you how to set up your Proctor U and what they look for. I would say that books on a shelf in the back that you're clearly not able to access or touch is fine from the video that I watched. However, don't have them on your desk and don't have them on your floor or around you. You have to show them a 360 of your room and show them different angles of your wall. Don't have any notes up on the wall or anything stuck that you can actually read. But if a book is closed and on your shelf, they'll be able to see if you get up to go and grab it. So that should be fine. Can we go back and edit previous questions? So far from what I've been told, the answer to that is yes, that you don't have to do it in chronological order from start to end, and you can flick between questions. I don't know if there'll be an ability to flag a question or to put like a little red mark that you weren't able to do it. So if there's not that option, I would grab your piece of scratch paper, and maybe up the top I'd draw like a little line, and above that I'd write all the questions I wanted to go back to. That's something I would do if you're not able to flag them on the interface. And one more thing I was going to say about that, you can also switch between your part A and part B essays as you need to. So you don't have to close one and finalize it before moving on to the next. All right. make the most out of section 3. All right, so someone's asked me, do you have any questions on how to make the most out of section 3? I'm worried that I won't be able to comprehend the question properly on an online platform. I'm happy to answer that, but I might let Keely have a go answering it if she's filled out.
Yeah.
Our section 3 whiz.
It will definitely be different, and I think it will depend a lot on how you have previously gone about answering the questions. I know for me, I don't tend to annotate my stems very much when I work through section 3. What I've mostly done on pen and paper, I might draw a few equations or a few little diagrams and things like that, but that's nothing you can't do on your scratch bit of paper you have next to you. The biggest thing I think personally I would find as a disadvantage is that I like to cross my options out as I go along. It's like, oh, for a question, I go, okay, well, these two obviously aren't logical answers. I'll cross them out straight away and then work it out between C and D or whatever the question is. That'll be the biggest disadvantage for me personally. But again, if you're really stuck on a question and like Sarah said, you're thinking you might need a flag and come back to it, make a note of the question number and what to answer, and just write C and D, what two questions you'll answers you're kind of tossing up between, and come back to it. For a lot of them, like diagrams and things like that, there's no need to really make a big note. If there's something really important, like there's a variable in like an equation or some kind of abstract model there that you're a little bit unsure of it, again, I'd note it down on your bit of paper next to it. And yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. I would also recommend the same as for section 1. If you can do it in your head actively, fantastic. If you're struggling with that, keep your paper nice and organized, and let's say question 10, I would be doing something like a flow chart as I go through so that I've picked up each bit, or going like a dot point, like paraphrase kind of thing, similar to what I showed you with the long text for section 1. Obviously section 3 is not written quite the same as section 1. There aren't many long texts at all, but you can do the same thing and bring it through logically so that you're not missing things if you need to and you find a question quite convoluted. Okay, I wanted to know how the online classes will be provided. Yep, great question. So we're going to be doing a couple of things. They will vary slightly. I'll also show you, I'll go back a second. So these are the topics we'll be covering in each class. So our section 1s are very much split up by question type. Section 2 is sort of a progressive start overview of tips and tricks on writing your essays, and then it will be starting to work through ideation, planning, and actually writing your essay, bringing it together and analysing and editing. And section 3 is going to be basic questions you can get. So there will be some following through of here's some bio stuff, here's some chem, but rather than clumping it in terms of the type of science, it will be more about looking at question type and thinking type. So that's the type of stuff we'll be going through. In terms of the actual sessions themselves, there will be some things where I go through, or where the tutors will go through strategies and tips, but also we'll be creating content for each week where you actually do worked examples in class. Our section 1 classes will have a quiz each week. The section 2 classes probably won't, but we'll have interactive activities each week. And then after your session each week, you will then have our section 1 and section 2 classes will have content to take home and also do at home. Keely can tell you a little bit more about how her section 3 is planning on running.
Yeah, so same as Sarah was kind of saying for section 1, we're trying to group it together mostly by question type and how we would apply it. And we will have a few little bit of content bits in there, particularly some of the high yield things that GAMSAT tend to like to test a lot. But yeah, we'll be focusing on question type and how to apply your knowledge, because again, there will be some things that they'll test you on that you have never even heard of, and do not stress about it, because most people will be in the same boat. There are things you see every year that even I think scientists wouldn't have never even heard of. So it's totally okay. So that's why we're kind of focusing more on how you apply the knowledge, because a lot of the time the centers will provide you information. And similar, we're going to have kind of like an in-class quiz. We're kind of going to, I think, spread it out though throughout our session, so we can have, let you guys have an opportunity to work through it yourself and then discuss it kind of more as a group as well. So everyone's had a chance and is familiar with the questions that we then try to explain how the tutors will actually answer them.
Beautiful. Okay. One person did have a question. If you cannot come to a specific mock exam slot, that's fine. We just need to know and we can send out the mock exam to you. Also, today's webinar, if you want to go back to anything, is being recorded. So it will be uploaded online for you to access. Okay. Content writing. Yes, so we are currently also organising take-home questions and take-home quizzes that you can do so that you have more content for you to access as well. Okay, did anyone have any other questions for us? If you come up with a question or you want to know more, you are more than welcome to email me. This is my email. You can also look up Halad on Facebook, and you can look us up on our blog, and you can find out a little bit more about us and also about our GAMSAT services, and you can read about all of our tutors, including the ones who weren't able to be here tonight. And yes, thank you so much for coming. I'll hand it back over to Carleen or maybe Eliza.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Sarah. I hope that was super insightful. Thanks so much for Keely for popping in. And as Sarah said, you can email her at any point if you have any other questions. But hopefully we will see you all soon, and good luck with your studies. We truly do hope that you guys do feel well prepared, and that you're all going to do terrific. All right, have a good night.
That is the hope. Bye, everyone.